guys, so today I am being joined by my beautiful wife Lily, who is going to be here today to kind of help me tell our story. I felt like it would be appropriate to have both of us tell you guys our adoption story versus just me by myself talking into the camera, because obviously it's both of our stories, so we wanted to kind of sit here together and talk about how we got started with the process and everything that's kind of happened up until the point of us getting matched. Obviously, our previous video that I posted was us finally announcing kind of our matching and everything with the adoption, but so much stuff has happened before that point that we definitely wanted to share everything from the very beginning and kind of share with everyone how we got started with this process and everything that happened in between, or that's been happening for the last kind of year or so, because we've been in this process for about a year and a half. So it has been a long process, so we wanted to share it. You know, we have told a couple of people our story here and there, but this is, I feel like it's going to be our full story from beginning to up until this point, which will be nice to share. So I think it's important to kind of share or start from the very beginning as far as what encouraged us or what kind of, you know, persuaded us to pursue adoption before we even start the process. I think one of the main reasons why we pursued adoption was that we knew from the very beginning, or before we even got married, that we were going to have some difficulty conceiving our own children, and that's kind of, you know, what prompted us to always keep adoption as an option for us if we wanted to start a family, because we knew that it would be very difficult for us to have our own biological children. So adoption's always been something that's been kind of on our minds, kind of something that at the beginning we kind of always put on the back burner in hopes that we would someday, you know, conceive our own kids. But we always told ourselves from the very beginning. And I think
it's important to point out that adoption is still our kids.
Yep.
So I want to point out that it's natural kids versus our, I don't know, our connection kid. Because I feel that being matched, I already feel like a mother. And I feel that we should, you know, yes, we wanted our biological child, but I think this is what God intended since the beginning. So I think it's good to have like a little point where we say, yes, we wanted to have our biological kid. But I think our first kid, it's going to be our kid too. So
right, yeah, we're still obviously seeing this child as our child. You know, obviously, you know, some people take different routes, or God places people in different kind of, you know, paths in life to become parents. You know, some people who aren't able to have kids at all, and this we know is what God intended for us. You know, and to become parents, to have a child, and we already love this kid. I mean, we've met him once through Zoom, and we haven't really met him in person yet, which we will be doing very soon. But we already feel like this is our kid. We know, you know, from the moment God started kind of moving things and ordering things and putting things into place, we knew that this is what God intended for us to do from the very beginning. You know, if we do end up having biological kids later on, then great. But if we don't, we're always going to feel like this child belongs to us, and this is what God intended for us from the beginning. So full disclosure, before we even start the story, this is what, you know, we know that this is what God intended for us, and it's something that we were able to see throughout the years. You know, we've been married at this point for 9.5 years. At this point, we'll be celebrating 10 years of marriage in June. So we knew, you know, in those 9 years, when things kind of didn't start going according to our plan, that we realized that God was the one that was in control of our plan from the beginning. So like I said, we knew from the very beginning, before we even got married, that we were going to, at some point, pursue adoption, or adoption was always open to, you know, was always open to us. So we decided back in 2020, I think, very early 2020, late 2019, early 2020, that we were going to finally pursue adoption. You know, it had been, what, at that point, 8 years of marriage, and we wanted to start a family. You know, obviously, you know, after 8 years, you want to start a family. We at that point had been ready to start a family for a while now. So it was definitely something that at that point where we're like, okay, you know, we need to do this. We see that the biological thing isn't happening at this point, and we don't want to keep, you know, waiting, at least for us to continue to wait for these biological kids. So, you know, we decided at that point, okay, let's finally pursue this adoption. You know, we had some friends of ours who had adopted at the time as well. who really served as encouragement for us, and their story and hearing their story was just amazing to us and inspiring and everything.
I think it was the last push.
It was kind of the last push that we needed, was to finally pursue adoption, because we didn't really know where to start or where to go or how to do certain things. So just hearing their story and how they did things definitely encouraged us to finally, and
having somebody's story guide us through, because we say we want to be parents, we want to adopt, but how do we start? Like, what is our first step? So having this couple friends going through it encouraged us so much that they helped us get to that first step.
Right. So so in early 2020, late 2019, we finally decided to start, and at that point we knew that there were going to be some financial expenses that we were going to have to have. So at that point, after deciding, we prayed about it and we said, God, okay, we're finally making this decision. We finally want to move ahead with our adoption. So now it's time for you to provide with finances, because we're going to need finances. We're going to need money to start for, application fees and home study, and obviously, getting everything ready as far as, a bedroom and all of these other things, travel and
exploring
expenses.
what type of adoption we wanted to go with.
What type of adoption we even wanted to go with, because we obviously, there are different types of adoptions. You can adopt, babies, you can adopt within foster care, there's international adoption. So deciding, looking at kind of how expensive everything was going to be, that kind of, persuaded us into what type of adoption we were going to end up going with. So we did end up choosing adoption through foster care because it was the most inexpensive, and I feel as well it was the one that we were being pulled toward the most. Because it was kids that were, that have had difficult lives, who unfortunately, were put in foster care because of whatever reasons, and we wanted to kind of really give those kids a chance at having.
And they're older. Not everybody goes for older kids.
Right.
They are more likely to sit in the system for long periods of time until they age out and they have to be out on their own. And having, that thought of how many kids are in the system that are ready and need a family. I think that's what pulled us the most, because we were ready to provide stability, love, and a caring family. And it's not only us, but our families as well.
Right.
So
So at that point, we decided, obviously, going through that adoption through foster care. So at that point, we started, making some calls and kind of getting some general information as to how, adoption works, adoption through foster care, going through kind of the initial orientation and everything at that point. And this was, again, early 2020. And then, as everybody knows, COVID hit early, March of 2020, COVID hit, the world shut down, and we were kind of left not really knowing how to proceed at that point, because all of these caseworkers were now working from home. Everything was
closing down.
Everything was closing down and brand new. This was a lifestyle that people weren't used to living, and workflow that people were kind of getting used to. So that definitely slowed down our progress at the very beginning when we finally decided. We filled out our application. We went through the initial orientation through just like mail and paperwork, because normally the agency that we're working with will provide kind of an in-person orientation that we were unfortunately not able to go to because they were no longer providing that. So we filled out our application right after we read through all of these pamphlets and everything on our own, and decided to mail everything in and kind of see where things went after that. So we were connected with our caseworker at that point and kind of started the process of training, I guess you would call it, because there was a 10-week course that we needed to take for foster care, because we are certified in foster care and adoption through foster care, so we can either adopt a child from the foster care system or foster kids as well, because we are dual certified, I guess, in both of those things. So we went through our 10-week course for these classes and all of this training, and in between those 10-week courses, or actually right before those 10-week courses, we went through the home study process.
Which it worked in our advantage, because usually you have a huge gap, but we were able to fill out the application and do all the paperwork even before we started the classes. So by the time we started the classes, we were all set with the visits and that interview, all of that stuff. That it's tedious.
It's a lot, yeah, because at first,
a lot of information.
Before we could take the classes, so the classes started in the fall. What was it? Sometime in September of that year of 2020. So right before that, obviously, you know, we were getting everything else ready. We went through our initial kind of visit or meet and greet with our caseworker, and she came in and kind of talked to us about the process of, you know, what we were looking for, why we wanted to pursue adoption, and kind of a little getting to know us kind of session. And then after that, every 3 weeks, she would come in. She did kind of an individual interview with me, then did another individual interview with her, and then 3 weeks later, she did kind of the walk around of the entire house to kind of, you know, look at our home and see what kind of home we could provide our child, you know, obviously the space that we had and everything. And then a little bit after that is when we started our 10-week course, which went through up until the right before Thanksgiving of 2020. Which was, I mean, you think about it now and you're like, that was such a long process, because we started in March,
April.
Late March, early April, you know, up until all of this was done at the end of November. So at that point, at the end of November, we were told, you know, we took our classes and everything, and we were told that we needed to, you know, just wait like a week or two until our caseworker was done with our paperwork, so we can get, you know, our home study signed and everything, so that we can get officially certified, so we can start inquiring on children. And unfortunately, at that point, our caseworker ended up getting COVID, and then her daughter ended up getting COVID right afterwards, so we lost complete contact with our caseworker for a month.
We signed in February 1st, so it was more than a month.
So it was more than a month that we lost contact first, and then we ended up needing more things. So we lost contact for about a month with our caseworker. Finally, you know, a month later, she ended up finally emailing us back and apologizing, you know, profusely, because she had, you know, unfortunately she'd gotten sick. There was no communication. Then her daughter got sick, and she had to stay home an extra 2 weeks and everything. So she had no access to computers, work things, anything at all. At that point. So we finally got in contact with her, started the process up again, you know, to finish up the home study, and at that point we found out that there was clearance from Puerto Rico that needed to happen. Which was a whole nother thing. I lived in Puerto Rico for about 7 years of like my childhood, from the ages of 10 to 17, and because we needed to have, or they needed to do like a background check for the last, 20 years? 28 years or something. Puerto Rico fell into that 28 years. So they needed to end up looking or getting clearance, obtaining clearance for me from the time that I lived in Puerto Rico, to make sure that, you know, I had no records, even though I was a minor while I was living there. So that was a whole nother ordeal, having to contact people from somewhere else through the phone and going back and forth until we finally got the clearance. And that took probably about another 3 weeks or so, maybe an extra month.
Yeah, I think everything felt so long.
Everything felt like it was really long.
A month for us felt like we were waiting for 2-3 months. It was just like a long period of time where just silence.
Right.
And I think we had to, just to put a pause into the story, but also like into our background and our emotional state, because it was already a year of us like trying to move things along, and then like these bumps in the roads kept coming and coming, and this is one of them that took a toll. Like it's complete silence, nobody communicates. How do we reach Puerto Rico and you know, and have them send our papers? And it was just a matter of how do we do this, asking God for guidance, and kind of like powering through. Because it was emotional, at least for me. I know at some point it got to you too, where we were like, God, is this the right thing? Are we doing what we're supposed to? Because everything seemed like everything was going well, and then a huge stop.
And then we hit a huge bump in the road. And those are definitely, you know, they can discourage you. I think those big bumps in the road are either going to make or break you. People are either going to give up and not want to kind of push through and work through this difficult time, or they're going to, you know, they're going to kind of take it in stride and move forward with it. And we decided, obviously, you know, we knew that God was calling us and guiding us to do this. We needed to push through this, and it helped us kind of, you know, to persevere through that difficult time. So that was the first.
I think at one point I felt like Gideon, where I kept asking God for signs, and just because I was in a place where I didn't want to be disappointed anymore. I mean, it was, at this point, it was 9 years of us praying. You know, we wanted to have kids. and having to go through those disappointments, and how many times we went and got pregnancy tests and it was negative, and it was like another huge disappointment. So I think in asking God, is this truly what you want us to do to avoid another heartbreak, I think is what put us through that emotional bump where we needed to like constantly ask God for help and guidance.
Yeah. So so we go through obviously this bump in the road, this hurdle that we had to surpass, and ended up obviously getting through our clearance, finally going on February 1st of 2021 to go sign for our home study. After a few months of us thinking that everything was going to be complete, we originally thought that by Christmas time we were going to start inquiring on kids, and we were going to be able to go and start looking at kids. Obviously, as if you guys aren't aware, there's an inquiry process after you've gotten certified, where you go on these websites. Every state has a website of like their kids that they have available for adoption and everything through foster care, and you inquire on these kids. You read kind of a very short profile or very short, one paragraph description of the child and what they like. And if it's something that you think you're interested in, or a child that you think you're going to be able to parent, you send, your inquiry for that child, wait for the caseworker to kind of ask you for your home study, and then kind of go from there. And then at that point, if you're being considered for this child, you go into kind of an interview process where the caseworkers kind of advocate for you and present your family as a potential match for this child. So it feels kind of weird when we were told at the beginning that this is kind of how inquiries work. It felt really weird because it literally felt like you were online shopping for a kid.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but it feels like it's a portal where you just open it up and you're just shopping for kids. And we were like, I think one of our first, and I want to make a point of this because later on in the story is going to come, like we even pray that God, don't let us choose. Like how do we know how to choose our kid? It's I will feel horrible if I pick one over the other. Like all of them are seeking and looking for the same thing, which is a family. How do I decide? I don't know who's the best one.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So it was kind of another prayer time where we had to like dive in and ask God for guidance. And we thought initially it was going to be easy, great, we're going to pick, and they're going to pick us. No.
And we were told, and in the classes we were told, because at one of the last classes, there were other parents that had gone through the same kind of situation and everything that told us that they went in as well expecting to get matched really quickly, that they were going to be the exception and everything, and going to end up getting matched a lot quicker than everybody else, because we're told at the beginning that the inquiry process can take about a year, until you get matched and everything back and forth. Obviously with COVID delaying the processes, everything is just taking much longer than usual. So, obviously we went in thinking as well, no, we might be the exception. It's not going to take as long. And
we're ready for this.
We're ready for this. And then things obviously, take a turn. Things start taking a lot longer than what we were expecting. And we realize that we're not the exception to the rule. No matter how amazing we think we are, no matter how amazing our family and our friends think we are, and how amazing parents they believe we think we're going to be, not everybody will see that. They're obviously just seeing you on paper with a couple of little tidbits about you, and from there they kind of choose whether they want to know more about you or not.
And that's another thing, we don't pick anyone. The social worker for the kid is the one that does the match. So we are not, our social worker and us have to go do a good job of painting a pretty picture of who we are, so the social worker for the kid can see us in paper and think, okay, this is the family I want to match this kid with. So it's kind of like making sure that in that 3-4 pages you plaster your life in a way where you kind of, I don't know, I see like be marketable. You have to be, I don't know, you kind of have to sell yourself as good parents so they can pick you, or you stand out. It's kind of like sending a resume for a job. So it was another thing that made me think how systems and things work, and delay the process just because they're looking at everybody in that way.
Right. So that's just kind of a brief explanation of kind of how inquiring works and everything, and kind of, you know, how things looked for us. So I think we're going to cut it here at this point because this is kind of a very long story. We don't want this to be an hour-long video. So we will be posting part 2 at some point next week and telling you guys kind of our story of when we actually started inquiring up until the point where we started, or when we finally got matched, because that's a whole other story, and a lot of other things happen there. So keep an eye out definitely for part 2 as we kind of finish off our second half of this adoption story as well.